I don't know how hot this is, but we'll see.
Have any kind of signal showing you?
It does. Okay. Yeah, it says we're live. We'll see where that's going.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
It's funny, to get myself more in the shot, I have to really make that pretty cockeyed.
Use some different tools of the trade, huh?
That's it.
You need to have this fairly close.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, this is the only studio where you have to be this close to
Close
the mic.
to the mic. Every station's different. Every studio is different.
Well, look at you. You're prepared.
Well, somewhat. Three, two. And a big good morning or big good evening to you, depending on if it's Sunday or Saturday. We're everywhere. James, good morning.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whenever you listen to this. And the reason we say it that way is because we do know that there are a lot of people that, are listening to this, on a Saturday evening time, which is at 8 p.m. And so, of course, if there's a Gator game, then obviously they're not going to catch, we won't catch us. We'll get bumped for that, but that's okay. So if you're not an early morning riser, and some of us aren't, I included, then you can catch us at that different time. And, of course, we're on Apple Podcasts, and you can go check out your other, wherever you download your podcasts, and type in Ask Mr. Greethumb, and we should come up. And, somebody was asking me the other day, how do I get a hold of you on the web? And I'm like, well, if you're interested in gardening and that kind of thing, you type in Ask Mr. Greethumb into a Google search engine, and your website will come up.
And let me see the pictures. If you can, take a shot far away and maybe one really close. I had a gentleman the other day who sent me the pictures, and I could tell what was going on with his citrus. He had serpentine leaf miner. He looked like he had some scales, some aphids. He kind of had the whole
gamut.
The whole gamut of everything that could possibly be. And he had bark coming off of another ornamental tree. And so we have booked him next Tuesday. We're going to go out and see him. And I should say James is going to do the injections. I'm going to do the pointing. And we have a division of labor that way. Actually, I really appreciate James knows the technical thing. And he has everything labeled in boxes and very meticulous. I can't say that I am nearly as good as James is at that.
And I always remember to bring gloves so I can make sure that I can protect myself when I'm using pesticides.
Well, that's the reason you carry a pair in any car you're in. I can't even believe it. What a prepared guy. He has a box in every car.
Super prepared for those that are not prepared. And so I always have to think about that. That's the Boy Scout in me. So.
I had an email last week to a guy from Ramsey, and he said, love Gator games. But he said, your show is the one of all shows on radio. He loves our show the most.
Of course he did.
He said even more so than Gator games. I said, more so than Gator games? And he said, yes. I said, well, Ramsey, that is hard to believe, but
And commendable.
And commendable. And I'm glad you set. He said I set a timer and alarm to make sure that I always listen to you on Sunday and Saturday as well.
Of course.
So we
I mean,
appreciate
who doesn't?
it. Yeah, I mean that's what I call true dedication. So I was going to mention there are a bunch of flowers that really can bloom year round here. And, some people think of like knockout roses. They will bloom pretty much 12 months a year. They do get into some mildew problems. Now, they've been touted as not having black spot much. I don't know. All roses can have some problems, but knockout are a year-round bloomer, so that's good. Most roses I've grown in Florida.
Well, typically when people ask you about roses, don't you try to steer them towards other things because of the maintenance requirement?
Well, I do and I don't. I mean, I have a couple of roses that I'm not doing much to. What I love is that I don't do a lot of spraying on these roses in my backyard, and yet I just picked another rose the other day and I thought, this is amazing, because I hardly ever spray my own. I'm like the shoemaker's kid that doesn't wear shoes. I don't like to spray a lot of fungicide or herbicide in my backyard because that's where you like to walk. So
Right.
I'm a little bit, to me, like so many things in life, I can see the balancing act. I don't want the insects running off with stuff.
Right, and I mean, and that's the thing I noticed too, is that, even with local municipalities, when I called them up and said, hey, my dogs have fire ants on them and I have fire ants on them, I mean, the backlash that you get, because again, and again, I'm not trying to make this a political issue, but again, we kind of live in a time where whoever barks the loudest and with the most amount of people, that's kind of the way it goes. And
I don't like fire ants either.
Right, but I don't really like fire ants. So call me crazy, but yeah, I'm going to need to have those treated, and so that's why I had the City of Clearwater guys come out and take a look at it and say, hey, one of the things though that I don't exactly understand is that, and I thought I made a pretty good point, but I still kind of got kind of I wouldn't say a dull stare, but sort of that look. Is I said, look, I understand that this is not an area that you guys consider as part of your budgeting process. But in my mind, if you start to learn how people are using a field, because I started explaining that people have little picnics out here, and people have, because right next to where I live, I mean, just to give you a backstory, right next to where I live is a park. And right next to this park, there's an open field that abuts next to the townhome community that I live at. And the issue is I said, well, don't you guys take into account how something is used from a prior year and then implement that into your budget as to something that, okay, they're having ad hoc soccer matches. People literally, there'll be 10 people get together and they'll play soccer, or they'll start to use a facility or an area that's a public space, which they're allowed to do. But one would think that would change the mindset of how you take care of an area. And what I've learned, and I'm not saying that this is with all governments, but at least in my little pond, that no, it really doesn't. What they do is what they do. And, and unless you were willing to get 5 other people to attend a city council meeting and explain how an area is being used multiple times, you would probably have to do that multiple times in order for them to change how they view that space.
Well, one thing I would say is you can write letters too. I mean, I wrote a letter to the city manager in my little community and just said, hey, this tree looks dead. It's hanging over the street. I said, my biggest worry is that some young child will be riding to school on their bicycle, and at that particular moment,
right,
that it could fall and could injure or kill the child.
Right.
And I said, I'm just making you aware of that, because if you are made aware of a problem,
right,
then it is kind of incumbent upon you to figure out a solution to the problem. And in that case, the solution was to hire a tree service to come in and take the tree out. And I'm not one to take trees out very easily. If I think a tree can be saved.
If it's dead, it's dead.
Yeah, and this tree was probably, 3/4 dead.
Mm-hmm.
There was a hint of life in it, but not much. It had a pulse, but that was about it. So in that case, I felt quite good that what we did was not only good for maybe the child or the parent, but also maybe good in the situation that, if you can head a problem off
Oh yeah, yeah,
at the
no.
pass. And you can't come back once somebody is on record that you know of a problem and say, oh, we didn't know.
Well, exactly, and that was one of the points that I was going to make. Is that as soon as you tell somebody that's a position of authority within your municipality that there is this potential of a problem, you take away the I didn't know defense, and then at that point, you put them on notice, and then if a problem does occur, then whatever the issue was, then um, as the saying goes, oh boy, you're gonna pay, and you will, and so that's one of the, and I would say that that works too, and again in Florida, you can write a letter if you want, but email is also generally admissible in almost every courtroom in the state of Florida. So you can also write an email.
Right.
The only issue with certain email is that you do have the defense that people have. Well, I never got it. It went to the spam box. I never received it. Never, Now you're having to fight it as to whether or not somebody received it. So that's one of the issues that people have even to this day, is that when you send a piece of mail registered, certified, and you can see the signature on it, then you can show that as no, it was actually served and somebody got this. So you can, and then that is a record that can be very clear.
If you do send an email, you can always follow up with a phone call and say, hey.
You can, but in the moment that the person responds to your email, that's confirmation they received it.
So there are things that can be done, and I think people should be proactive to a point. And you point out that there are people who are like, never kill a fire ant. Go kiss a fire ant tomorrow. Well, that's fine. If you wish to do that.
Well, until it's their kid, until it's their dog, until it's their loved one that is experiencing, a problem, then all of a sudden people start to care. But I generally find that in this world that we live in, is that most of the time people don't care unless it generally affects them.
Sure.
And it has to be that type of scenario for a lot of people. Now, empathy, you would think, would lend itself naturally, but it doesn't. And pretty much, and again, I don't mean to sound cynical, but most of the time I talk to people, I would say 90% of the conversations that I engage in with people, rarely do they ever ask me how I'm doing. It's only about them.
Sure.
And that's just kind of a human trait. We're all a little bit narcissistic, I guess, in that regard, but empathy is kind of something that we have to work at.
Sure, I think that's very true. Well, going to switching gears to another plant, Ixoras, or one that bloomed. We have some out here in front of the
Salem Radio
Studios. They're mighty studios here. We saw that I think Dale planted them. He put them in this last year. He improved the soil.
Yeah, and they're doing well. The only thing I have noticed is where they're really bunched up tight together and they're under the tree. One of the things I did tell Dale is I said, well, you probably need to apply a fungicide from time to time, because I think you've got there's some soot on the back of the leaf.
I take a look at it. Yeah, it could be some insects too.
It could be, but it to me it looked a little bit like
a mildew.
Like a mildew.
Yeah, which is a primitive fungi.
Yeah.
And we're in Florida. One of the problems, and we've all been rejoiced lately because after the bad storm, which our heart goes out to all the poor folks who were injured. Yeah, we were. I look at that and I thought, if it had come into Tampa Bay, we would have looked the same.
It would have been a minefield.
You would have seen these great big cabin cruisers up on top of docks and up on somebody's yard and in on the street. It would not have been pretty.
It would have been ugly, and thank God that did not occur. With that music, we are going to go pay some bills. Please don't change that dial, and we'll be right back to talk more about gardening and or real estate.
So stay with us as the plant talk and real estate talk continues right here on AM 860, The Answer.
Yeah, and precisely that commercial that you're hearing at the end there, I'm not sure that home consult resonates with people. I think you need to define the problem.
Yep.
And that's why you just go after specific things.
Well, I think when we come back, we could mention that a little bit.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we're going to just do a tree injection
Which I think is good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think if you don't hammer people,
You got to hit them with the problem.
otherwise it's too easy to be fluffing it. Just
But yet, I see almost every week, I'll see somebody post something about, yep. Let's go. And okay. But they're so happy to post a photo of the thousands of dollars that they've spent.
And we were talking earlier about home calls, and I might mention to you, the reason you need to have someone like myself inspect.
A certified arborist.
Certified arborist. I'm also a horticulturist.
Licensed pest control operator.
Licensed pest control operator. So I'm a CPO. And I can look at things. Your next biggest investment to your actual house and your car is, and maybe more so than your car, would be your landscape and your trees, especially your trees. And I'm always amazed that we kind of go in the door, we go out the door, we go out, we might walk the dogs, whatever, but you really don't pay attention to the tree. You don't inspect that trunk. You need to look for little bore holes, little BB holes, sap, sawdust, problems, bark fluffing, bark flaking off. And people just don't do that, and I understand that. You don't do it until there's a problem, but it's like so many things. If you can catch it early, and I'd even go so far as saying just like health issues. I was watching one of those shows the other night with the doctor who goes through the post-mortem on someone and why they died, and they were talking about Elizabeth Montgomery, who was everybody's beloved before your time, but Bewitched. I don't know if you've ever saw.
Oh yeah, the wiggle the nose.
Wiggle the nose, and she had colon cancer, and I kept thinking if she'd had somebody check her early. Now,
I don't think that they were doing that.
They didn't. They didn't check people like they do today, and she had a bad situation. It was stage 4 by the time they found it, and so she died like within a month of them finding it. And I thought, what a horrible happening. Now,
big time smoker?
She had smoked. Well, they were saying in the late 50s, 50% of adults were smokers.
Yeah. And,
in some of these cancers, I didn't realize until they were saying it, the doctor was talking about, and I'm not a doctor, but, sometimes 20 to 30 years after somebody even quit smoking, the signs that heavy smoking shows back up.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Especially in colon cancer. Not so much. Lung cancer usually shows up a lot quicker. But I kept thinking, if there's something that you can do. But I remember, being a child, most of the people I knew, most of the adults I knew smoked or had smoked. Most of them were still smoking. Some people were smoking 3-4 packs a day.
Oh, it's awful. I mean, and I have a neighbor, nice enough lady, but my goodness, every morning, I'm making coffee, she's outside making her, caffeine in a different light. She's getting it through her cigarette.
Or nicotine.
Nicotine, rather.
Yeah.
She's getting a different kind of teen.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's for the same reason. It's to, it's an upper.
It's a stimulant, just like caffeine.
So that's, but the issue is that, there's this horrendous coughing that takes place that I hear her doing, and she's only a few years older than I am. And, you would think she was a coal miner, and so, I understand why people of that generation, you're talking in the 50s, why, because I think that was kind of her heyday, wasn't it, in the 50s?
Yeah, I would say 60s, probably.
50s, 60s,
Yes,
70s. Okay, so, but again, I would say generally, the knowledge base that we have today with regards to what it does to people wasn't what it was then. I mean, then you could make an argument that, the knowledge just wasn't there. We suspected, but we didn't know. But you can't say that today. So when I stop at a light and I see people rolling down their window and they're just puffing away on their, with their cigarettes, I'm almost kind of shocked sometimes. I mean, I shouldn't be, but I am. And then, and again, in American culture, it's very pervasive, but it's also, we're actually, in Florida in particular, since, we have laws prohibiting where people can smoke. Again, growing up, any younger people wouldn't even know this, but, there was you literally walk into a restaurant, do you want smoking or non-smoking?
Sure.
That was the standard.
And half the time, and my parents smoked, so we were in the smoking section.
Of course.
And in a smoking car, too, but...
Right, and so, yeah, and so at the end of the day, it's a compounded problem. But I would say, today we know, but then what's kind of changed and what's switched now is, you have probably less younger people smoking traditional tobacco cigarettes and more younger people smoking the vape. Now, the one positive thing that I'll say about the vape is I don't necessarily think that's a lot better for you. In some ways that may be worse. But one of the things I will say is that if I have to breathe a little secondhand vape, it stinks a lot worse, or a lot better to me, less than it does than traditional tobacco. And it doesn't seem to provide the same level of irritation to my eyes and other things that traditional tobacco does. So I guess from a very narrow-sighted point of view, I guess I would rather people do that than traditional tobacco, but I'm sure there's some, pulmonologists out there that are going, no, don't be saying anything about that. But, well, here's the thing. People are going to do it no matter. So
you would have hated radio 45 years ago when I
wouldn't
first
have
started.
done it. I would not have done it.
Because you would come into a little room like our studio.
Well, and I did as a kid. I came in one time and... and I was in there for maybe 5 minutes, and it was at some small station out in the middle of
WPLP.
Podunk, nowhere.
It was 570, actually, one of our frequencies that comes through our Faith Talk station here.
And I remember it must have had some kind of plumbing issue because it had a sign on the door as you went to the restroom. It said, if it's yellow, let it mellow. If it's brown, flush it down. And I was like, they must have some issue going on with their plumbing here.
We had a septic tank.
Ah, that would explain why. But anyways, it's one of those scenarios where, I was in there for 5 minutes at the radio, at that particular radio studio, and I came back out and I felt like I had been in a coal mine or a chimney sweep business, even though I was only in that studio for 5 minutes. So yeah, thank God it's not that way. I would never, and again, I play tennis 3 times a week, and you need excellent cardiovascular ability to be able to do that and to play competitively. And you just can't be a heavy trained smoker and think you're going to do competitive sports. They do not mix.
Yeah, well, going back to that station, it was owned by Dan and Joe Johnson. Great folks. I enjoyed Dan passed away a few years ago. I think Joe still, I've seen she and her son, he does a lot of commercial work. A lot of radio spots and television spots and things of that nature. Has a good voice, kind of like our radio spot guy here, who does a great job.
The Golden Pipes.
The Golden Pipes, kind of like our old Pole Porter. But so anyway, it was a different situation. Yeah, you got to visit, and but I had to do that every week. And when you came out, your clothes smell like you'd been in the worst bar that you'd ever want to have been in. So you did get some secondhand smoke, no doubt about it. But
yeah, and actually, I mean, a lot of bars today the law is pretty interesting on that. Bars, if you make more of your money, and I forget the percentages, but if your percentages are more on alcohol sales than they are food, then smoking indoors is okay, and the rule doesn't apply to you. So just keep that in mind, that certain bars are going to still be smoky when you walk into them. And with that noise, of course, we're going to go pay some more bills, but we are going to continue talking about gardening, and we'll bring in some real estate related matters when we come back.
Stay with us as the plant talk and real estate talk continues here on AM 860, The Answer.
Good flow today.
Say?
Good flow.
Yeah.
You gonna ask the one about commissions?
We can talk, yeah, about a little about financing programs to know. They talk about down payment assistance. I've never met anyone yet that got down payment assistance, but I guess there may be people.
Well, it's tough because
FHA,
I'll explain a scenario.
VA.
When we come back, I'll explain a scenario that the girl I play tennis with was explaining to me that she's dealing with.
All right, well, it'll be a good lead-in then.
Yep.
I'll ask you a couple of generic things, and then you can.
Great. All right.
And I am Stan, my son is James, and we're the dynamic duo. When it comes to, I answer gardening questions. James knows a lot about real estate. He's a broker and has a company called Dream It Real Estate. And we are still kind of making that happen. So
it's a labor of love, because it's one of those things where you don't just create a real estate company and overnight. There's so many things and so many components that go into it. But you had some questions.
Well, yeah, I was just saying, as the market evolves, and that's a word a lot of realtors like to use, it's changing.
Right, which is a lot like the word climate change.
Climate change. Yeah, what is climate change? I used to like it when they said global warming, because they say, well, it gets cold. Well, now you can say climate change, and you can take it both ways.
Right.
It's cold, hot, water, flood, whatever.
Boy, they tried their darndest to make these meteorologists with Hurricane Ian. They tried their darndest to get them, I won't say which news stations, but you can guess, to make a more complete statement on climate change and that these hurricanes were more severe than they've ever been. And most of the meteorologists held tight, and one of the guys was quoted as saying, well, I don't think we want to make broad assumptions on a particular one event, so I was happy to see that.
I think that is great. Well, going back to the question, I find a lot of people want to go and stick their nose to the glass to look at the new car or the new house in this case.
Always.
And what they don't really have is the finance part together. And especially now people have done 100 deals, that's not a question. But for the first time person or the second time person, I think it's funny too, by the time they've sold their second house, they're all experts.
Of course. 2 homes in, you've seen it all.
And that's not really true. But the big problem I find for so many folks, and I say that, and I remember an agent telling me this, and it was probably 40 years ago, and he said, you need to make sure your finance is set first. And I was kind of insulted. I thought, going to tell me I need to worry about financing first.
Yeah, that silly money part.
And I thought, really, and what he said was exactly right. And he actually told me, don't get your nose out of joint. This is something that no one thinks about. And he was right. And I, being kind of naive at the time to real estate deals, I thought, why is he telling me about money being the most important? Well, money is more important in almost any deal you do in any fashion in life. Sure. Money is there. And the question is, people have heard terms like FHA, VA, down payment assistance, but I don't think they really have an idea. I mean, I've known veterans, and they go, oh, I know it's out there and I think I can use it. FHA, they go, well, I've heard of FHA, but they don't know how it can help them, and they know about maybe down payment assistance, but how do they get that? I've never met many folks who've had much help with down payment assistance.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are programs out there for that. The reason that none of those programs are all that interesting right now is because you have so many homes in Florida that are closing with cash, and it's eliminating the other part of the buying pool, that are waiting in line wanting to buy something, but, the sellers are definitely going to look at somebody who has cash way harder than they are going to look at somebody who has to have a loan. And the problem with FHA and the VA, it's not that they're not good products. They're excellent products, and that they're both government-backed loans, so you know that they're secure. But the issue is, they also come with more baggage, and that they want to make sure that the home that they're making an investment in isn't trashed. That it's still the frame and bones of the home are in good shape. That doesn't mean it has to be perfect, but there's some oddball scenarios. And one of the clients we helped many years ago, or I should say you did, he was buying a home FHA, and he got into a scenario where the guy was, they wouldn't give him the loan without making sure certain repairs had been made. Now, here he hasn't signed on the dotted line, but he had permission from the current owner that was selling to go into the property and make the repairs. But here he is making repairs on a property he doesn't even own prior to the closing, but with the seller's permission. That's critical that I say that, because you can't do anything in somebody's home. You can't rip out stuff. You can't rip out, you can't do any of that stuff. And as agents, you can't just let people inside a home and start, tearing stuff up to make it, you can't do that. And if you do, you're going to get, and I don't care if you've recently got your law license, you're going to get sued, and you're going to lose. Especially if they do the one smart thing that an agent should do. When you know that there's a problem occurring between you and another agent, whip out your camera, start recording it. Because at the end of the day, it will always boil down to a he said, she said kind of scenario. So you better make sure that you have documentation to support your side of things if you think it's going in that direction. Hopefully not. I'm sure there are many agents out there that will go through their entire career and have minimal problems with the law, and God bless you for that. You got lucky. But one of the things that I would say that you're seeing now is, well, not just now, but it's endemic of this, of what we're, the changes that we're currently going through. And I'll give you an example. A friend of mine that I play tennis with, she indicated that she's interested in potentially selling her home in January, but of course she's in a situation that a lot of people are in. The house that she's in probably is worth $600,000, somewhere in that ballpark. Okay, and so she, but she's in a situation where they don't really have to sell. They're waiting for their new house to be built or finished, which she suspects is going to be finished around January or February of next year. So the thought process is she's, she doesn't really want to have an agent do it, because it's like, well, I put up a FSBO and I've got 17 showings. Why would I care? Why would
she
I
has
care?
to act as agent, but yeah.
Well, and I made it pretty clear too that make sure you have everything, all your ducks in a row. You need to make sure that I said you have to be the one that's there to cater to the people that are coming in to see the property. You have to be you've got to make sure your home's always looking nice. There's a lot of things that you need to think about that'll be on you. And so the FSBO thing comes with a price. But she's in a situation where it sounds like she's only working a couple days a week. It doesn't sound like she's, if you don't have a lot cooking in your life and you're not, then go for it. But she, in my book, she represents about 1% of the people out there that can do that. Most of the people are going to need somebody out there with the expertise that understands how to fill out a contract, understands and just because you're a homeowner and you're doing something FSBO doesn't mean that the rules don't apply to you. And the
Sure.
I don't know thing that's not ever going to work or fly. So, when somebody gives you earnest money, the same rules still apply. Those have to go immediately to whomever is going to be your closing person, whether it's going to be a title agency or if it's going to be a real estate attorney who's going to put those into an earnest money account.
Well, I talked to a lady the other day, she wasn't even sure what earnest money was or where it went, or if there was any way to make someone give up their earnest money.
Well, sure, and that's all stipulated by the contract. So being a good reader is one of the things that you're hoping that your attorney, I should say your agent, is going to be able to do. And if your agent doesn't know, then they should check with an attorney.
Well, I talked to this lady, said, well, I don't know, I read the contract after it's all been signed.
Right. Well, once it's been signed, and if you weren't privy to that signing, then especially if you're in a situation where it's messy. And a lot of times it is messy. Like if you have multiple kids and you have one person as the designator on handling, like an estate,
Right.
Somebody that is considered the person that has the sole authority,
Like the executor.
the executor. Thank you. That's the term that was blank. Then they can make those decisions without checking with you.
Sure, because they've been designated by the court to make that
Right.
decision.
Contractually, they've been designated to do that. But that doesn't mean that they're always going to make the right decision for you or for what's best. And especially if that person is having their own struggles in life, it can be challenging for them to even care.
Well, especially when you're out of state sometimes too. Let's say you're in
Right.
3 different states,
And that happens a
or
lot.
4 different states. You can have all kind of problems.
Correct. You have family members that live in multiple states. That becomes very complicated, which is why a lot of times, and again, just because we started our own real estate company, or I should say I started a real estate company, that doesn't mean that we can't help people with their assets, and especially if you're out of state. I mean, that is something that, if you have an interest or something like that, you of course can go to my website, which is dreamitrealestate.co. That's dreamitrealestate.co, and that's an easy way to learn more about what we do. And one of the things that we do is that we still specialize in real estate auctions. And so, a lot of times that's a really good choice for people that need to dispose of an asset quickly, and to still get fair market value for the property. And but again, that's all built on speed. It'll become more of a thing that people will be interested in using as the market becomes less appetizing. And every time we get a Federal Reserve rate increase, which seems to be happening every month, then borrowing money becomes more expensive, and as that happens, then you're going to be left just with cash buyers, and there is a limit to how many cash buyers there are out there. So eventually, I would say that if we continue down this path and we start looking at mortgage rates of 9-10%, we are going to run through cash buyers, and then we'll be back to working with people that can only use mortgages to buy stuff.
And every time they raise that a point or part of a point, there's less house you can usually buy, because you're paying so much more for the interest or the privilege of borrowing that money.
Correct, and I would still argue that in Pinellas and Hillsborough County and Pasco County, we've kind of approached that critical mass in a lot of ways too. I mean, the people that work here don't really have salaries to support the type of loans that they would be required to get in order to be the purchaser of a property at the average price that properties are being sold at. So that's a problem.
Right.
So now, and I would say largely that the state of Florida is going through a metamorphosis, in the sense that we're having to figure out this entire new influx of people. Now, I mean, I think the word gets out, about what to do. I mean, but I think there still was a lot of confusion in Fort Myers with regards to, oh yeah, this happens. Out west you get earthquakes, and here we get hurricanes, and now this is one of the negatives of, we don't get snow, so we're not doing that, but now we have these 150 mile an hour hurricanes that blow hard for hours and hours and hours and hours.
And now there's some question too: are some of these insurance companies solvent enough to pay for everything?
Find out.
And if not, who becomes on the hook? Does the federal government become on the hook? Probably. I mean, you've got to bail people out because you kind of guaranteed them protection.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, if people have insurance policies, they did their part. And the whole idea behind state legislation is to make sure that these companies abide and take care of people. That noise, we are going to go pay some bills. You are listening to AM 860, The Answer.
So stay with us. "24 hours a day. Give him a call." No.
Huh?
I said, give him a call 24 hours a day. No.
Well, they can call me anytime they want.
Yeah,
you're only going to get me from 8 to 8.
Oh, but it's great. So let me know about the thing on Sunday. It might be interesting. I don't know. I have mixed emotions about it.
Yeah, I mean, why don't you just go?
Well, I thought about it.
There you go.
Maybe that, or see if Mom would want to come, but she hates that.
She's not going to go. No. The problem I have is that I've got so much cooking.
Yeah.
It's like the weekends are kind of sacred.
I think politically it would be good to show up.
Well, I think it would be too. Okay. Yep.
And we're here to answer your questions, be it trees, shrubs, and the like. Your homework for the week is to go out and take a look at those trees real closely. Look for little tiny BB holes. That tells me that you've got some borers. A neighbor of mine had a tree. The tree looked healthy, and a big branch of her pine missed her house by a foot.
Oh, okay. So that's what precipitated the idea of having to have them come back out again. Which actually, if I remember correctly, she wanted them to take that tree down before when they were out taking down a different tree, and they weren't contracted to do that. So it turns out she was probably very much correct in that
Colleen
scenario.
is a busy little bee, and she stays on stuff. She's one of those ladies who goes, okay, you've told me no. Now I'm going to tell you why you should get something done. And
she's a smart cookie.
She's a doer.
Yeah, and I was watching them put that structure up this past weekend on their deck thing, and it's very nice looking.
Yes,
it's very sharp. So yeah, they're taking a kind of a smaller to medium sized home, and they're really making it into something that has a lot more livable space. So I definitely commend them on that.
Well, especially for people with porches and patios, you can extend it, and so much of the year here you can enjoy it outside. I mean, yes, in the morning, in the evening, if you've got an enclosed area, you can really enjoy those structures. So I commend you for that. We, of course, we're talking about some plants and stuff that you can use. Bougainvillea, we mentioned last week, is a natural plant to draw blood.
Oh yeah, the burglar bush.
But we're also thinking of, we mentioned Ixoras. Blue Days is one that flowers about 12 months a year. Little small plant, has little blue flowers. You might think of it. You might think of blanket flower, which is Gaillardia. It's kind of called painted daisy. Most of the daisies flower a lot. We have a daisy, an African bush daisy. And I like it because it looks like it'll die back. I cut it way back, water it well.
Is it actually from Africa?
It originally, and it's in the composite family, which makes it into the Ariaceae family or Asteraceae family, which you think of asters. They're all ray-like flowers, and it's a large family. There are a bunch of them. Most of them have bright color, and most of them will flower almost every day. Now, getting them established, but it's the reason in the fall people think of chrysanthemums, which are also in the same family. Marigolds are in the same family. So you've got a whole bunch of those ray-like flowers. If it's a ray-like flower, it's probably in the daisy family or the aster group or composite, we can call it also. And so that's an area that people really enjoy. I like them because they're so colorful. They have that yellow-orange colors, and my African bush daisies are bright yellow. But I've had it now. Now, up north, you might consider it just an annual. Here, I think we're going into our third year of it still being in a container and still looking really quite good. Marigolds, I'm thinking of starting some more out in the front around the little mailbox thing, just because I think they're pretty.
Sure. Yeah. When I even, yesterday when I was getting the mail, and again, it kind of takes over a landscape, but when I put in the bougainvilleas, I also sprinkled out some morning glory seeds, and and I kind of forgot about it, but now and again you will see that it's kind of a vining plant.
It is.
And but I noticed that the flower on the morning glory had, and again, if people aren't aware, it has a really pretty vibrant blue purple color. And But it closes at a certain point, and then it opens back up the next day, and that's what I didn't. I thought when it closed it was done, but it apparently that's it.
A lot of flowers tend to close up at night and then open back up. Or if it's a shady day or rainy day, they'll close up and then they kind of open back up.
Why do they do that?
Well, I think it's kind of a protection for the delicate flower, and it's also it's almost like they're triggered for pollination. Their main goal is the male part, the anthers, put pollen onto the stigma.
And maybe the bugs don't do what they're supposed to do at night as they do during the day, or.
And some plants are geared toward moths and bats that can pollinate.
So it just depends.
And they'll flower at night.
So it's more of a depends instead of a hard rule.
It's kind of how nature rules, but that's kind of interesting. Sometimes flowers too, the first day they'll be cross-pollinated from another flower. The bee comes by or whatever insect does that. And if it doesn't, they'll tend to curl over and they'll self-pollinate. They'll pick up the pollen that was left that they didn't get pollinated, but they. It's not really a brain per se, but as we always like to talk about our biophilia.
Biophilia.
When you think about it, when you add all these, there's something great about seeing, God's handiwork, in my opinion. You're out there and you see those flowers open. I've never looked at the face of a flower and said, I look at a flower and go, gosh, aren't you beautiful, and aren't I so fortunate to really enjoy you? And I think so many times too in our fast-paced world, where we're all living on the Google, we're all living on the internet, that we don't take time to go, okay, I'm going outside, I'm going to look at something pretty.
Right, and it's something non-electronic, and I say this almost every week, is that, I don't care if you are into meditation or whatever it is that you do, but 5 to 10 minutes a day, just try to find some quiet, okay? And I don't mean like right after you wake up. I mean like, in the middle of your day. I don't care if I don't have time. No, you need to make time, because it really does improve the way you think. It'll get you more focused on the tasks that you're trying to handle, and you'll be more productive. So 5 to 10 minutes of just nothing. Try to, as the Buddha says, try to just let it all out. Don't think on anything.
Kind of just meditate. I think
and that's
that is
tough.
Fantastic. Yep.
And that's a tough thing to do. If it takes work to train yourself to not let anything in. So that's my little advice of the day. And of course, some of these questions repeat a lot, but I'm looking at the October Florida Realtor magazine, and one of the questions that was on here says, I'm negotiating the terms of a listing, and the seller has asked that I get a flat fee commission as opposed to a commission based on the percentage of the sales price. Assuming that my broker agrees, is that acceptable? Well, yeah, I mean, of course it is. Commissions are 100% negotiable. So, you could do something for, $1, I guess, if you really want, or you could do something for a much higher percentage.
Your broker may not appreciate that, but.
Right. Your broker may say, no, we don't do that at our brokerage, and there may be some minimums that are in place that won't happen. But yeah, the only trouble that certain people get into is that you're never going to get in trouble by charging too little. You could get in trouble for charging too much. If it's grossly above whatever the standard is, and for a particular type of sale, you could see some trouble with that. But mostly, as long as you're not egregious with that. Now, in the real estate auction space, they typically get more money. And we're just getting a text coming in asking about a gardening question. Somebody's asking about a rhododendron. So they didn't specify, but I guess they're having problems with it growing correctly, maybe in the wrong location for the wrong place.
Does like an acid soil. We typically grow azaleas here, which are members of the rhododendron group. Check that pH. No one ever does. Mm-hmm. I did talk the other day to one of the home show promoters, and they said, might have you back next year when we get back to doing live, more, bigger venues. They've been doing smaller venues and kind of surviving.
Sure.
Which they have.
Sure.
But they said, look, at that point, if we get you back down, let's say at Tropicana or something, um, we can use you. I did try to call and talk to a couple of there's a couple major leaders in the business. One guy, I don't know how he does any business because I called him and John doesn't answer his phone at all. So I don't know how he plans anything ahead. But not to pick on you, John, but I find that amazing that that doesn't work. But the other guy did call me back and he said, hey, we might want to use you next year. He said, because we do like it when you do the free pH testing and people
Yeah.
come in and you give a little lecture about.
It's an added value, and it provides a lot of benefit for folks that, especially since we have so many new Floridians that don't know anything about the fact that we have less than 1% of organic matter in the soil. You're coming in from Ohio, New York, New Jersey, any of those places. I mean, it's going to be a very different type of soil composition than you're going to find here.
Normally a better soil there than here.
Right. And so here it's very devoid of the things that the plants need, and then people wonder why they're the brown thumber in their neighborhoods. It's because you've got to try to make it to where it can compete. But of course, that is the end of our show, and we appreciate anybody out there that was listening. And always stay tuned for Dr. Bill Hamilton.
Stay with us as the plant talk and real estate talk always continues every week here on AM 860, The Answer. So take time to smell the roses, enjoy your life, and as old Teddy used to say, go out and live it up.
Okay, so what do I do here?